morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're all well. Cannot but delve into the business of the day. Grab a cup of tea. It will be a working so that we don't really create that too much time for tea, given that the discussion is going to end at 1 with the lunch. Start with tea, and we'll get back, then we can get started in less than 10 minutes. Tea is served just right there at the back, so we'll be starting in less than 10 minutes. Please, we are all invited to grab a cup of tea. a face, and also be able to put the message out there that we are discussing about this. So Penina, please, you're welcome to share some remarks.
Good morning once again. Good morning. Okay, thank you. So my name is Penina, as I had already introduced myself, and I'm here to welcome you to this meeting. And we have had a number of engagements around the energy transition, but specifically talking to how Africa is ready, if Africa is actually ready to be able to transit and be part of this discussion. And while we know that so many of these dynamics have kept on changing in regards to even being key players or part of the stakeholders that would be reached out in seeing how best to position ourselves in this discussion, we have seen most of these discussions also a bit limiting on how they have been inclusive, but also equitable in regards to where we are as Africa. So the reason as to why we're having this discussion today is to see to it that we can be able to interrogate a number of different issues. One especially on what is happening globally in regards to countries that have secured themselves in regards to the raw materials, the critical minerals right now that are actually being extracted, but also being extracted from Africa especially, because as Africa, we have been brought into this discussion, and yet we're actually having so many critical minerals that are actually um, being threatened to their extinction right now. And some of the issues around it is also how best are we as Africa positioned right now in this discussion, but also seeing that there are so many different countries that are taking on a stand when it comes to banning of exportation of critical minerals. We know Niger, for example, has also come out to increase the market price for their different minerals that they have, but also reviewing their mining bill. And we know these are critical strategies or policies that we have also internally as Uganda on reviewing our bills, but speaking to the strategies that are there right now in regards to energy transition, whether they are fit to purpose, how best are they in trying to also shape our preparedness as Uganda, but holistically also as Africa. And given the fact that we know that the global narrative of the green development and clean energy transition has been mainly aligned to the UN SDGs, mainly on green jobs, creating green jobs and industrialization, and also to address the current climate crisis. We know that so many countries have not fully adopted so many of these strategies to battle the climate crisis, and how the link is in that is that the energy transition is also very vital in seeing how best we can be able to fully adapt to this, but also create our own narrative in shaping the energy transition discourse for Africa, but also especially for Uganda right now. So we really want to see how best to interrogate this, but also in regards to when it comes to trade, we know that there are so many different directives as well that have been pushed on from the EU and other global powers that have also questioned where we are as Africa, because some have been more used as raw material extraction from Africa, and these from mainly the critical minerals that are being extracted. We know so many districts that are currently undergoing so much mining projects, especially like in Karamoja. We know that there are so many different challenges that come with this when it comes to human rights violations, but even for people being able to, the communities especially, being able to be brought into this discussion, how this is going to shape or change their livelihoods, but also even their own environment in regards to us having this discussion on energy transition. So we need to put a human face to these issues, because it not only does it impact a country wholly, but also impacts the lives of indigenous communities. Also, in regards to where we see ourselves today, whether we do have a framework that is able to speak to Africa's needs and challenges, specifically to Uganda as well. Also, why I keep bringing in Uganda is we need to also domesticate these issues even further, and that is why Siatini is trying to engage thoroughly around building an Afrocentric narrative to have an inclusive and just energy transition. So it is very key that we have a number of different stakeholders in this room that can be able to be to add their voice, but also speak on behalf of the different communities that are being impacted today, and see to it how the geopolitics today in the energy transition has continued to change, but mostly benefiting the bigger powers as we know them, and how best we can be able to strengthen our position right now. So it is very imperative to have a current discussion around this narrative, but also see to it that we're able to design possible alternatives towards shaping an Afrocentric, inclusive, and equitable energy transition. So thank you so much for being here on time. We truly appreciate it, and we hope we can be able to have a fruitful discussion in regards to how best we can and issues, because most of them are have been left to be technical or seem to be technical, but there's also the geopolitics that we feel that we need to communicate also largely to how it's going to impact the energy transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Penina Mbabazi, who is heading the Trade, Investment and Development thematic area at Siatini, Uganda, for elucidating on why we are here, but also throwing some light on the issues as pertains the discussion on the geopolitics of the energy transition and its implications for Uganda and Africa at large. Allow me to also emphasize that the main objective why we are here is to basically deliberate on Uganda, all Africa's position in the geopolitics of the energy transition. A lot has been said, because this is not the first engagement that we've had on the issue of the energy transition. We've had several discussions, and the need for Africa to transit from the use of fossil fuels, renewable energy technologies cannot be overemphasized. We all know, because Africa is facing the worst effects of the climate crisis. And on the other side, we have contributed the least to the climate crisis. But as the discussion around the energy transition ensures, we also need to be active participants, because increasingly there is a scramble for critical minerals in Africa. Africa has huge deposits of critical minerals. But also on the other side, whereas individual countries in Africa have deposits of these critical minerals, there is no single country that has all the minerals needed, for example, for hydrogen batteries. The critical minerals are spread across all the African countries. But as we see the energy transition discourse unfold, there are major players, big players in this energy transition discourse that have emerged. There is the European Union that started this discussion around the energy transition with the Global Gateway. The Global Gateway initiative is there, and it spells out really what EU is up to, but also its relationships with African countries, because European Union has had a long-standing relationship with Africa, way back from the Cotonou Agreement, but also how the EU has actually had a long-standing relationship in terms of trade, the EU trade relations that touch some of the critical raw materials, but also agricultural products in general. And on the other hand, we also see China's dominance with the Road and Belt Initiative. That's also another initiative that is also kind of shaping how the energy transition is going to be all unfold, because China has a strong footprint in the mining sector in Africa. It's a strong footprint, nearly up to 30%. It owns and dominates nearly up to 30% of the mining sector in Africa. But also on the other hand, we see the United States of America also coming to the fore as an important or a key player in the energy transition discourse with the Inflation Reduction Act and the industrial policy. It's shaping its industrial policy. On the other hand, when it comes to the European Union, there is also the carbon border adjustment mechanism. But all those directives, all initiatives have implications for Africa because Africa's position in the global economy hasn't been favorable over the years. We've been trapped at the lower end of the value chain as exporters of raw materials. And there are issues around the structure of our trade. We've been discussing and talking about how we need to rethink the structure of Africa's trade, where we need to add value to our products. However, there are limitations of technology. And the reason why initiatives like mechanisms like the carbon border adjustment mechanism will affect Africa is because we export, even if we add value, we export carbon intensive products. And so they attract a tariff as spelled out in the carbon border adjustment mechanism because of using outdated technology or old technology. But we see the energy transition also creating market for green technologies from the West and from China, because we all appreciate and know that China is a manufacturer of solar technologies, and it has really a key position. It's actually on top when it comes to manufacturing solar technologies, but also critical raw materials processing. It's really playing a critical role. But we see some of these initiatives, all tools, policy tools that have been brought forth. For example, the Inflation Reduction Act by the United States of America are responding to EU's policy tools like carbon border adjustment mechanism. So there is a scramble for resources in Africa among the big three. The EU bloc, because European Union has quite a number of countries that have really a footprint in Africa. But for the EU has an approach of moving as Team EU. And that's why the EU negotiates agreements with Africa as a bloc. For example, the Economic Partnership Agreement. And it also has far-reaching implications. We have the free trade agreements, because Economic Partnership Agreement is one of the free trade agreements, among others. And we've seen the EU use such agreements to continue to exploit resources from Africa. And Uganda is no exception, because we are all in Africa. So this discussion is really important for us to interrogate the geopolitics. We saw with the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, a number of issues unfolded. How so many countries depended on energy resources from Russia and Ukraine. That's why we cannot really talk about the energy transition without talking about the geopolitics. But also, increasingly, there are strong players that have been created in this energy transition discourse that are actually shaping how business should be done at the end of the day. And increasingly, we are on the disadvantaged side of it because of our unpreparedness. When it comes to policies, there are different policy initiatives that are in place, because Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, also lays a foundation for other policy tools, for example, the Africa Mining Vision, among others. However, their domestication or incorporation into the national the domestic policies is also something we can talk about during this engagement, because there are a number of pillars under the Africa Mining Vision that we need to interrogate whether we are really up to the task. But also when it comes to participation of key stakeholders in this discourse, is something that we really need to also interrogate. Are we participating in shaping how the energy transition discourse is unfolding? As Siatini, we have observed that Africa is being frog-marched into the energy transition. We are taking the narrative that is coming from the West. And that's why Siatini is shaping an Afrocentric, inclusive, and equitable energy transition where no one is left behind. And this links up with SDGs, sustainable access to affordable energy sources. But also, when we talk about the energy transition, we cannot ignore the role of different government ministries, departments, and agencies, because they define the pathways, they put in place the policy tools that we need. But we cannot operate in a vacuum. There's a discussion that is unfolding at the global level. At the recently concluded World Trade Organization Public Forum, issues of decarbonization came to the fore. That it's not a matter of transitioning from use of fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, but decarbonization is also key. But when we look at how that can be achieved, it also has everything to do with our industrial policies. Access to technologies, but also intellectual property rights to be able to manufacture green technologies. So it has everything to do with our trade, investment, and industrial policies. That's why Siatini has been emphasizing for long the issues of technology transfer being included in our investment code. If we don't have issues of technology transfer, then how will we be able to catch up? Because for long, Africa has played catch up. The West is already up to the task. For them, they are cushioning themselves from the catastrophic effects of the climate crisis. And us in Uganda, all in Africa, the stories have dominated, really the dailies about unfortunate events, how the climate crisis is causing really colossal loss of lives, the famine in Karamoja, and that's one of the negative effects, but also the rising sea levels, among others. So we are basically here to interrogate the geopolitics. What's our position in this energy transition discourse? What can we do to have a favorable position? But also, how can we shift from exporting raw materials, primary products, to adding value to these products? Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to once again introduce our keynote speaker. I'm calling him the keynote speaker because he's going to be setting the pace for this discussion. He's Mr. Ferdinand Tonye from United Nations University Institute of Natural Resources in Africa. So he'll be speaking to some of the issues that I've alluded to, and also sharing with us the developments in terms of policy, but also the preparedness, the geopolitics, and also sharing more insights around our position in this energy transition discourse. But before I invite him, I bring you greetings from Siatini Uganda's Executive Director, Ms. Jen Nalunga, who will be joining us at a later time. She truly appreciates having you all and our continued engagement with you all. I would like now to invite Mr. Ferdinand Tonye from United Nations University Institute of Natural Resources in Africa. He's joining us virtually, but he has been listening in and he'll be sharing insights around the geopolitics in the energy transition and its implications for Africa. So the team, the live streaming team, will be able to relay that and make it possible for him to speak to us. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope you are hearing me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Good. So
yes, sir, we can hear you.
Good.
Please proceed.
All right. So your team can allow me to share my slide. That would be fine. So can you see my slide? Is my slide being shared?
We can see it, sir. Please proceed.
Okay. So good morning again, and greetings from Ghana. It's a very early one here. It's about 6:55 in Ghana now. So sorry, I have to be doing this from home. And then also for the fact that I've also been off the office for some time now, working from home because I've not been too fine. So forgive me for the voice. I'm recovering from a little cold, and I just hope we're able to hear clear. Greetings from the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa. Greetings from the director, Dr. Fatima Denton. She sends her warm greetings, and she's always very enthused about such meetings because our institute stands for that. We are passionate about this conversation, this topic that we are discussing today on energy transition. I think it's one of the institutes in Africa that have been in the front in terms of research, and then also loud on this area, trying to say there must be an African voice when it comes to the energy transition, and exactly what you want me to share with you today. Thank you very much, Siatini, for the opportunity to share with you on this program. I want to also recommend my earlier colleagues or colleagues from the one who just handed over the mic. You've spoken a lot, and I think you should even start the discussion because you have laid down everything that this whole conversation should be about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to share some thoughts from our research. So I'm going to go in this outline, going to discuss some of our UNU initiatives that our research we've been doing in this area to bring up very key issues. Our research we always do to build point upon point and then give direction to where I'm having a feedback if that could be welcome.
Hello, sir. Please excuse us for just we can get the audio right.
Okay.
So maybe as we get the audio right, allow me to just in a summary introduce some of the people who have joined us here, so that maybe you could speak addressing the different stakeholders. Here we have some colleagues from the academia. We have colleagues from relevant.
I think I cannot hear anything from the room again.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's coming, but it's still not very clear. It's breaking. Hello, I can hear you, but it is breaking.
I think it has something to do with the battery.
I think so.
Hello, everyone. We are back. Never left. Problems. Normalize. Hello, Ferdinand. Can you hear us? Hello. Hello, Ferdinand. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you faintly, but if you can hear me well, that is fine.
I can hear you faintly, but if you can hear me well, that is fine. I can hear you well.
Okay.
Before we drop sharing with you who's in the room, I thought it would be important for you to recognize have a representative from Ministry of Finance, that, but we also have representatives from other ministries, departments, and agencies. We also have key stakeholders. That's from academia. We also have colleagues from civil society organizations working on issues of climate change, but also its intersection with other key sectors of the economy, gender, human rights, agriculture, among others. And they will be keenly listening and also following the discussion so that we could shape what we call an Afrocentric, inclusive, and equitable energy transition. So over to you, sir. You're welcome.
All right. So
All right.
I'm still getting a feedback.
So
I'm still getting a feedback. Hello, when I speak, I hear it myself. Hello, when I speak, I hear it myself. It echoes back. I don't know what's wrong. But when I speak, it's just delays and echoes back. Okay. I think it is fine now. If you can hear me, then I can go. If you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up and then I can continue. Can you hear me, team? Hello. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So initially, as I mentioned, maybe a microphone is on, but it came back again. When I speak, I hear myself. So maybe all microphones can be off and then so it's better now. Good. So I mentioned that this conversation is a conversation that I've been going on for long.
Hello, sir. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
We lost you. I think we need to text him to let him know that we lost him. Yeah.
So you can hear me now.
It's going to end well. Let's have hope.
Can you hear me now? Mhm. Can you hear me now?
Dear colleagues, apologies once again, but we are getting it right soon.
I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me now.
I think as we wait for the team to support us in fixing the audio, there are some colleagues who joined after we had introduced ourselves. Allow me to burden them a bit for them to introduce themselves, because we might be in the midst of someone we are looking for, and yet they are here. For all the good reasons, not the bad reasons.
Thank you.
Because the name itself speaks volumes about money. And then where he comes from, it's like a hive for. Of course. But we're glad to have you, sir.
Thank you, Herbert. Following what you said, I was looking for Mugaga. We recently had a Twitter space where me and him really were taking each other on, but it was a constructive engagement. My name is Robert Riachra. I'm the Speaker of the Environment Parliament and Deputy Executive Director of the Environment Shield, but I am in this capacity as the National Coordinator of the Environmental Defenders Network. So I'm very glad to be here, and I'm interested in having a conversation with Mugaga.
Thank you. You're welcome, sir.
I am the humble man with a humble profile. I am Talibita Moses. I I lecture in the School of Sciences of Nkumba University and in the Department of Natural Resources. So I am pleased to sit on the high table with the gurus in this aspect. But my contribution will basically be academic, and maybe I will also veer off into the advocacy, because
You're welcome, sir.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Blair Michael Tambi. I'm a lawyer by profession. I practice with KT Advocates, but I also do research with a research chair for mineral law in Africa at the University of Cape Town.
You're welcome, sir.
I brought Mugaga. Yeah. Wow, I'm called Sam Mugume. I work in Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development as an Assistant Commissioner in Macroeconomic Policy Department. I'm glad to be here, and I'm here on behalf of the PSST. And like I told you, I'll listen to what Mugaga is going to say and listen to what you're going to say and take to PS the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That is very, very critical, and we are glad to have you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Chirabo Nakajubi. I work with Environmental Alert. It's a civil society organization that has presence both at national and local, but also the positioning in the sector. We host quite a number of networks, but specifically of interest is the Renewable Energy Civil Society Organizations Network. Quite interested in these discussions and glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Kalunja Jonathan. I work with Ministry of Finance under the Climate Finance Unit.
Thank you so much. You're all welcome, and we're glad to know that we have the Mugaga, and someone brought the Mugaga, and they are representing the PSST. And all of us have ever wanted to talk to the Mugaga. That's a fact, because we need money. You're all welcome. That was on a lighter note, but we need to check in with Mr. Ferdinand Tonye, whether he can hear us now so that he can take charge and take us through what he has to share with us today. Hello, Ferdinand. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you also hear me clearly? Yes, I can hear you. Can you also hear me clearly?
We can hear you, sir. Please proceed.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll try as much as possible to just go with this, because I am going to try as much as possible to just I am going to put off my speaker here because I still hear myself, but the most important thing is I'm able to speak for the team in Uganda to hear clearly, because I still hear myself when I speak. But no worry about that. We'll go forward and then continue and speak on the issues to open the conversation. So I'm going to share my screen again. If you can see my screen, please just give me a sign, a thumbs up, then I can continue the presentation. Okay, good. So because of the new entries, let me greet you again. and say I'm happy to be here. And on behalf of the director of the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa, we bring you greetings from the headquarters, which is in Ghana, in Accra. So my name is Ferdinand Tonye. I'm a research fellow with the UNU. And it's a privilege to have to join this team. A lot have been said already from the earlier speech, and if I listened very well to the introduction from the various teams in the room, this is already a very rich room who may not need too much of explanation on the topics we are having now. So it will be a privilege for me to be sharing some thoughts, some research we've been doing. I want to say that this will be focusing on Africa. There will be few issues that I could narrow down to only Uganda, because we have been doing some research, and we normally move around Africa, the whole research center on Africa, and I'm glad that the conversation is also looking at Africa. So I'm going to share some thoughts from the energy transition on our previous research we've done and what we've been doing currently. And then our attempt to talk about the big issue for the transition. For us, we think there's one big issue for the transition, and I can hear some of those echoes in some of the earlier speakers. And then also come to a conclusion on what do we need as Africans. So basically, UNU is one of the UN agencies, but quite in a different setting. The United Nations University is the research and academic unit of the United Nations. So there are 13 institutes in the world. These institutes are scattered in 12 countries. The only one located in Africa is called the UNU INRA, which is the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa. And the headquarters is based in Ghana, and we have been specialized in natural resource management, and also basically what we do is we research to know. We also connect with people as we are doing this morning. We also contest knowledge. I'm happy the title of this conversation is looking at how do we position ourselves. So we don't only follow the global conversation, because we do research in Africa and want to have a voice for Africa. We contest global conversations and global research, which may not represent Africa very well. That is one thing we do at United Nations University. So basically, we are into research, policy advice, capacity building, convening space. We have, I'm narrowing down to just what we've been doing research in blue economy, agriculture, and other things. But today is on energy transition, or let's say transition. So these are some of I brought this few of our reports. Our first report, that was a very big one, was Africa's development in the age of stranded assets. I know a lot of people may not they are not too cool with the word stranded assets. Stranded asset is a word that came out on the fact that we are transiting into a green industrial revolution. There is the move towards green technologies. We have a lot of assets in Africa. We have oil, we have gas and other stuff. So if we are all moving towards renewable energies. So is it that one day we wake up and we have oil, which we have done our budget with, we've done our projections with, developments are tied to all these resources, which is oil and gas resources, and technology have developed, renewables have taken charge of the globe, and we have asset, but it becomes stranded. So it doesn't have economic value. So for us, when the whole conversation around this energy transition came up, we through our various research on how African resources are managed and how our economic um, um, progressions are tied to these resources, especially when it comes to fossil fuel. Then there is that threat that if we move to renewable energy, then we are going to have some form of stranding. So that's one of our reports. I'll share some brief key messages from them. Then there was another one on the blight alleys and bright prospect, Africa's navigating stranded asset and just transition. So there's that big one on the how do we navigate into the transition. So we can't be walking in we can't just follow the cloud, the crowd. We need to be able to plan and navigate well. So that report also talks, and the other reports are, as you can see on the screen. But the most important thing is I'll be sharing some key words from it. So we have about 2 major reports and other smaller ones. The current one we are working on, which we started last year, we've been to 9 countries, which is looking at economic implications of stranded assets. What is the economic implication of moving, saying that no too much mining of oils, let's move to renewables? What does it mean for Africa? So that one is cooking. It's almost ready, which we can also, I'll be sharing some few thoughts from that. We have other projects like just energy transition. Yes, we've been talking about transition, and the echo is now on just transition. What's about just transition? Is everybody inclusive? So this project, big initiative, was looking at how do we include everybody. So this is it was named Justice Project, which is just energy transition in the informal sector. Because most of the time when we are talking about energy transition, we are looking at the big companies, the formal sector, but the informal sector is given about 85% of African workforce, and they support the economy of Africa, but they are not mostly involved in this conversation. So there's a big work also like that on just energy transition in informal sector. The other ones I'll be mentioning about once I goes on, giving example to how this whole transition must be inclusive, must be looked at as a broad thing. It must not be looked through a lens of the developed countries. Who have developed don't have the issues we face in Africa. It must be broadened, so all the pillars of the transition must be understood. So we have one on which we call InfoCat. So how is women brought in, and how are we able to power our agriculture with clean energy solutions? And then where are the technologies coming from? Are they going to come from the developed countries? And that will be narrowing us into the politics of the geopolitics of this whole transition. So that is also there. You can find a lot of materials on our site to read on this. And then we also do some work in green minerals. So just a quick view of what we've been doing, but I want to share some few messages from our recent research and to be able to narrow us into the conversation. So from our research, Africa is kind of at a crossroad. The whole continent is caught up in 2 agendas. We have signed up to treaties. We have signed up to various agreements to save or to move towards a temperature target, which is 1.5. So we are holding on to that, and we are also having an agenda to meet the developmental needs of our people. So that is very key for us to be thinking about once we go on into this discussion. Government are also looking at saying that these resources have developed the developed countries. Why are we being told to move on, to leave these resources behind, when we have also discovered enough of them? Because for the past few years, Africa is leading in the discovery of a lot of resources, natural resources, and we know the politics around it, how they are flowing into Africa. So African governments think that it is our time to also use the resources to develop. Then we can all move together and transit. So the issue of stranded asset or even the transition have a historic precedence where already we have the natural resources, but we are not able to even maximize it to develop, to get it to every soul on the continent where they can be able to say that yes, we are using the resources well. So if there's a new conversation around green minerals, is it going to be business as usual? This is something also on the mind of leaders. So we look at stranded asset, or even let me put it, I can put it in context. We look at the transition as both risk and an opportunity for us, because we as earlier mentioned, we are looking at the opportunities that we can take advantage of the natural resource that the whole globe will be following Africa for. So the opportunity presented is for us to plan, that is resource planning, to be able to develop our regional markets very well. And then we also have the voice of African leaders saying that it is our resources. We have the right to them. You don't tell us how to use it. You don't tell us to leave our oil in the ground. This is the voice from African leaders. From our current research we started last year, we've not been to Uganda, but we've been to Namibia, Nigeria, South Africa, about 9 countries. Ghana is also inclusive. And African government are saying, it's our resources. Allow us to use this. You don't tell us to leave them in the ground. So there's that issue of national sovereignty, resource sovereignty. And you realize that if we are transiting, the capacity to be able to do that is not there yet. So Africa should be, way from our research, we think Africa should be allowed to transit, to go at its pace. We don't have the resources as they do. Even they who have challenges when there are shortages. So these are some key things that are coming up. And also to talk about the major polluters like China and US, who are not doing that much to be able to reduce pollution, but telling us who are below even 4% to do more. These are all the geopolitics of it, where African governments are waking up and they are realizing that, look, reduce your pollution, do something more than what you are doing. And it's not about just the talk. So these are very key things from that. Let me pull out some other things from one of our research, which has been already mentioned. Minerals for low carbon transitions. Yes, Africa Mineral Vision have been put together. They have identified about 13 to 15 critical minerals. They call it green minerals, but some of us think that mining minerals there's no way we can say they are being mined green. So we rather identify ourselves more with it as critical minerals. So from our research, one of our report, you realize that Africa holds about 42 of the 72 elements that will be needed for the low carbon technology transition. And for example, like DRC holds about 47% of the world's cobalt reserve. When you go to Namibia and Zimbabwe, they have 100% of the world's cesium, which is a very critical metal for this green technology. There are a lot, as you can see, 42 out of the 54 African countries have at least one of these minerals. So this gives us a lot of sense that, yes, if there is going to be any transition, then Africa could lead even the transition, not even them leading it. So this is why it is very important for us to be having this conversation. So for us, we can we can boldly say we have all it takes to go open the green windows that will take us into the new or the green revolution. But there is a need for a deliberate change of thoughts and way of doing things. The word must be deliberate. We can't continue doing business as usual with our resources. We can't continue managing our resources just as it is, as mentioned earlier on, being a raw producer. No, we don't move over the value chain and we just sell it and we are at the trade tables and losing out. No, we can't do that. Africa must be able to have a deliberate, conscious effort towards how we manage our resources. So for us at United Nations University, we have a research program which we call After Carbon. After Carbon is looking at how would an after carbon, which is an after fossil fuel economy look like, because that is what we mean, what the world is speaking about, that we are transiting, we are making a transition from the use of, in quotes, dirty fuels. So how would that economy look like? So we have a program that we call After Carbon at the United Nations Universities, which we have partnership with a lot of other countries, and we'll be glad to also explore Uganda. So it is an Africa facility for transition research. And what we are looking at is solution to create a solution platform, a solution that would lead us to speak as an Africans. So we have been doing this. We have a lot of policies that are not working, that are not being enforced. So can we start rather the normal research procedure or the normal development procedure will be like, okay, let's do research and be able to bring about policies. But we in UNU believe that there is a lot of policy already, but they are not working, and we are not finding out why they are not working. So can we start, when it comes to the energy transition, can we start from policy, pick the policies that are not working, and then into research and come back and retune these policies and then give solutions? So we see it at policy to research conversation, and then also bring architects together, bring all on board. That is, I'm very happy. I think this is one of the richest group I'm having opportunity to join, because I can see lawyers there, and I'm very encouraged by that. I can see all manner of people. Ministry of Finance is there, because these conversations normally are how in isolation. They don't bring all to board. So our research platform is looking at bringing everybody together, and also to have a go-to best practice hub. We must have a center of excellence that whenever you need solution, African government can walk boldly to that. And I think that is what you have identified, and we are providing that. So the big issue when it comes to this whole transition and the geopolitics of it is Africa have economic growth issues. We are declining from in 2022. We've declined from 41% to 3.3% in 2022. Which is 21 in 2021, we declined from 4.1 to 3.3. So we have economic issues. Debts are on high. We are about 60% debt to GDP already. When in even this year, it's even some are increasing. Oil and gas resources forms about 50% of our export and have the potential to accelerate our growth. Global drives towards net zero and energy transition is seen by African leaders as it's a threat to their developmental possibilities. So Africa argues all the time on every platform that yes, we understand we are not contributing much of the emissions. We are about 3.8% of the emissions as of 2020. But we are facing the biggest challenge of all time when it comes to climate issues. So Africa feels like we are a net positive rather than even a net negative. So our current research, we have identified that Africa leaders, one way or the other, yes, we need to take climate actions, but they also think that the push is from the global north. It's a Western imposition, and they can't wait. They should allow Africa to be able to transit on their own. So because they are failed on even their promises. So I want to share with you some of the quotes from some of our country research. So you can find from somebody saying from Ghana, we are in a boat with a leaking hole that we did not create. Even though we did not create it, it is better we fix it. So yes, African government are getting the understanding that we are not those who created the mess. But if we say that those who created the mess should fix the mess, then we are all in that leaking boat, and the challenge will come upon all of us. And you can, from some of these quotes, you realize that um, moving away from some of this energy or natural resources like coal and oil and gas, Africa economy cannot survive. So these are very fresh things that we've gotten from very key leaders and politicians and advisors to president on energy transition, that is giving the sense that when we say we should transition and then leave our resources, which some are even now being discovered in the soil, then we don't have an economy. So African government are saying we can't compromise our development with the transition or in the name of the transition. So the big issue about the energy transition, which is linked to the geopolitics, it's not about the technology Africa is not having. It is all about market. And I know very well about Siatini. You will understand this very well. It is the whole conversation and the geopolitics around energy transition is about market. It's about the trade. Africa does not have a purchasing power when it comes to the global energy economy. We don't have a purchasing power. We go to sometimes we are not even represented at these tables. The geopolitics of the market would stand in the way of Africa's development. Currently, as it stands, the geopolitics of the energy transition is standing in the way of Africa's development. Carbon market risks are there, and we can also mention issues like climate stranding. These are very big issues. The major issue about the geopolitics of this energy transition is about market. So let me summarize what has happened the past month at the African Climate Summit, and then this will narrow us into what the questions Africa should be asking or what Africa should be doing. The whole conversation around the Africa Climate Summit was about climate action financing. So it is about market and trade. So Africa government are saying that we need favorable terms, concessional loans. So it gives you the signal that we can't raise money on the continent. We need support from the outside, the global north. So there is also that cry for fulfillment of the promise made about 14 years ago on the 100 billion annual budget for adaptation and mitigation, which is not forthcoming. Those that we've received, that we can't even track very well how they have impacted. So the establishment of carbon market initiatives is a big issue for the EU, as one of my colleagues who spoke earlier on mentioned. So everything, if you go through this list that we are talking about, that we have been echoed at the Africa Climate Summit, it is just about market, a new paradigm, which is looking at a green market, looking at a carbon market, and businesses are developed around it, and sanctions are being put, mentioning the carbon, the border carbon border tax, if I may say it that way. So we receive pledges like 23 billion from the development partners. EU was also there, private sectors, and these sponsors who are interested in sponsoring renewable energy in Africa, some of them are Leapfrog, Maxda, and others. Maybe we should go through the list. How many of these investors are African indigenous investors? So the investment is still coming from the global north. Wherever there's money flowing from, power and detection, I won't want to use that word. I would rather want to use power and strings are attached to those investments. So it calls for us to rethink this. The new tone for Africa leaders, as you heard recently, is about ownership and sovereignty. It is our resource. We own it, so you don't tell us how to use it, especially when it comes to even the grain or the strategic minerals they are talking about. Let me give some few examples. You know, in 2020, when the COVID set in, there was a kind of some politics around within Saudi Arabia and Russia that led to 25% fall in oil prices. Two nations, they get into the space, and it affected the whole oil prices. And then Africa may not even be founded. So for example, when OPEC has also in 2020 negotiated or tried to push for a 10% production cut so that they can regulate the market. This is what happens. It is not enough for us to just leave or to just leave it, seeing ourselves, especially Africa, that, oh, some of us don't produce much oil, so we don't have much say. It is for us to speak and to come together. And I at least I can appreciate so much the voice of African leaders at the Africa Climate, just hoping that it will be a voice that will lead an action to, so that we can be able to move far in this. There is also the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is all about energy security. I will not want to go much into it, but we all know how this have played. How Germany woke up one morning and say, he's sorry, I have to open my coal mines again. These are serious politics. When they said they have closed and we are all moving, then when there's challenge, they go back. So these are serious politics. But for us as Africans, we will need to be together, have a singular voice. Yes, it is good news that there are some initiatives happening on the continent. For example, in Namibia, when we talk about this green hydrogen, it's a joy to always talk about Namibia. But let's look at something critical when it comes to this Namibia deal. So the investment in this renewable deal is looking at 10 billion US dollars. So to produce the green hydrogen over a 40-year period, with the goal of producing 2 billion tons of ammonia, which will also serve other industries like even the fertilizer industries. Namibia government was to invest up to 24% equity in this deal, which amount to 2 billion. Already they have raised 540 million through partnership with European Union, and then the Global Gateway Initiative, as mentioned also by a colleague earlier. But the sad part of it is that it is getting very difficult for Namibia to raise local bond or local fund to be able to take charge of this investment percentage allocated to them. So the realities are there. You look at Africa, the same thing is happening in Kenya. at the climate summit, they also launched a deal like that, and the investment is coming from EU. How much of percent investment is coming from the Africa soil? This is where the conversation is. This is where the geopolitics start. So what can Africa do now? Africa needs solidarity. It is very key. Yes, the mess was created by the developed countries. We need that solidarity. We cannot walk in this alone. But we also need that bold step, consistent actions. It is not about a nice speech. We need the bold steps. What is Africa's transition? Do we really get the meaning of the transition? What are we where are we transiting to? Where is Africa currently? If transition is about emissions, it have a link to emissions. Where is our emission levels? We are less than 4. So where are we transitioning to? We are already green, actually. Let's be frank. So is Africa understanding this? That what is our own definition? When we are talking about transition, have Africa sat down to know where we are and what our transition means to us, to be able to get that to the conversation table? When we mention justice or just transition for who? That is what we should be asking. Or we just talk about the just transition for who? Too much of exploration of our natural resource will also plug us into unsustainability. So we get so enthused about, we have the resources, we have the critical minerals, we have all the oil, we are discovering the oil. We continue to discover this, but the story of Africa has been the same. So continuous use of these resources will bring us sustainability. How to fix the developmental problems are very key. The structures, the security problems. What does energy transition mean in our perspective? We have never been able to sit down to discuss this. The transition is for Africa to define, actually. If we look at the whole conversation where we have the greatest renewable energy potentials, then the transition is for Africa to define. But have we been able to define it? No. The West is defining it. We just can't flow with the conversation of the West. For us at UNU, as I mentioned earlier on, we contest knowledge. Where is our evidence to show this is where we are and this is where we are transiting to? We have to, if the understanding of the energy transition is what we know currently by the global north, by their definition, then Africa should be leading the transition because we have all that it takes to transition. Tomorrow is too far. We need to solve our developmental problems today before we think of others. We can't continue to think about the global north, continuing polluting and telling us that, look, we cannot mine our resources to develop. Yes, we agree that we are all feeling the pain of the climate change, but there are big issues in Africa: poverty, hunger, insecurity. So for me, the energy transition for Africa is about energy security. The developed countries have their energy security already. They have developed the technologies. We don't have energy in even our common communities. Women are still using hoe. They are still using sticks to even meal. We've not gotten energy to those areas. Just to be told that we must leave the resources that will give us energy to get to those areas, it's suicidal. We must be able to redefine, sit as Africans, to define what energy transition means to us, how we are also concerned about the environment and the climate change, and the effort that we need to be able to make that. I am ending very soon in the next 3 minutes. So we should be asking questions. Given the vulnerability of external shocks such as COVID and other geopolitics. How can Africa countries stabilize our, even we have fossil fuel, we have fuels, but the prices are not even stable. So how can we even get fuel to be able to even power our simple agricultural settings? These are questions we should be thinking of. When you go to Nigeria, 50% of government revenue is coming from oil and gas. Transition from fossil fuel. What happens to development? How can energy security be ensured for countries that do not even produce their own fuel or electricity from fossil fuel? For example, Namibia depend heavily on South Africa for most of their energy resources. So how would they even start? These are all energy security issues that must be addressed. How can countries assess investment and finance for value addition that leverage the green minerals? Yes, we are all enthused about the green minerals, discovering more. In my country, we've discovered lithium in large quantity, and it's a big news. Everybody's excited about it. How can Africa or how can Ghana be able to leverage, get the financing or the investment, or we are going to depend on the foreign investment? So there are some few questions that we should be asking. Export market and export revenue. We should be asking questions on this, and also looking at how are we able to service our debts. We already have a lot of debts, and we have been fixed in IMF bills. How are we even going to be able to survive all these arrangements and be able to raise to be able to raise funding for this whole transition? So we are talking about managing the environment, and then also social impact for increasing demand, and then of these green minerals. All the global north is running to Africa. China and other countries are taking over. One thing we must remember is, yes, we call them green minerals, but they are not equal to green emissions. There's no, I've continued to ask these questions. How are we going to mine green? Because we all know how money is devastating to the environment. These are questions we should be thinking about. And then how do we take advantage of the carbon market? How do we trade? How do we choose our trade partners right? These are many things we should think of. Let me conclude by saying that Africa must be proactive in this new energy age. Looking at the geopolitics and the consequences it will bring to us, we must wake up and be deliberate on how we manage our natural resources. Socioeconomic structures and investment in this energy transition is very key. International cooperation is necessary. Planning the energy systems that are just and inclusive is key too. Forward-looking choices that leaders in government and industries make will create more prosperous future. This is what Africa must be thinking of. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tonye, for those insights. And you ended on a good note that we have to be proactive and forward-looking. And you touched on a number of pertinent issues, including the issue of stranded assets, whether we should leave it in the ground, all use our natural resources to get the much needed financial resources to transit, because we see that the global north that has contributed to majorly the climate crisis isn't coming forth with the much needed resources for us to be able to also transit. But we also see ourselves at a crossroads, because there are a number of initiatives that are being pushed onto us. We see the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, but we see the Inflation Reduction Act, among others. And Africa's position is actually, Africa is being looked at as, you know, the major source of these resources, natural resources. But we are being looked at as a source of these resources in a way of supplying to power the transition from the global north, in the global north. And yet we also have to define our position not as suppliers of raw materials, but as equal players in the energy transition. But determining the pathways and also standing out to define our position is also critical, which Mr. Tonye ably elucidated on. But also of critical importance is for us to come together to have holistic approaches. We are talking about the energy transition, but we also have issues with our structural transformation. Over the years, over the last decades, 2 or 3 decades, we've struggled with the challenge of how we are integrated in the global economy. We have continued to supply raw materials. It's not that we don't have policies. We have the policies, but some of them are not even being implemented. There are a number of policies at different levels. At the just concluded Africa Climate Summit, a number of financial commitments were made. However, those are commitments. It's not that money was, delivered. How do we move from such commitments to see climate action unfold? Because it's a matter of urgency. It's not something that we can postpone, that we will do tomorrow. But collectively, as we are gathered here as stakeholders, especially given that we have government representation, I think we can yield the much needed proposals to shape the policies, even at national level, because we have the nationally determined contributions at the national level that we have to implement. How are we faring as a country, as Uganda? So that discussion is what Mr. Ferdinand Tonye tried to allude to, although he shared perspectives from Ghana and Africa at large, but still the same applies, because as Africa, we struggle with the same challenges. 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. And in Uganda, in 2020, Electricity Regulatory Authority revealed that 1.7 million people don't have access to electricity. They are not connected on the national grid. And so it's really a big challenge. We are talking about the transition, but from the Eurocentric point of view. I think what is important in this meeting is to talk about the energy transition from our point of view. What does it mean to us as Uganda? What does it mean to the communities? What does it mean to the women? Because we come from so many constituencies. What does it mean in terms of our own development, achievement of SDGs? And of course, a number of discussions have ensued around the non-realization of some of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. I think we can all contribute to this discussion, and I invite all of us to raise any issues to Mr. Ferdinand Tonye, all ask any questions that will complement to this discussion. We're all invited. Maybe by show of hands, we could have some representatives. But before we delve into that, in our midst, we have Dr. Brian Isavidia from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. I think it's important. You're welcome, sir. It's important to recognize that he's here with us. And in case there are any concerns at national level that are within his jurisdiction, he will be ably responding to the same, because Mr. Tonye Ferdinand might not be able to respond to what's within the mandate of our national ministries, departments, and agencies. So I invite us to briefly raise any issues, but also supplement, not basically questions, but supplement on this discussion that Mr. Ferdinand Tonye has started. Thank you. So my colleague will be moving around with the microphone.
I'm requesting that I give my submission because I have to go for another meeting in line with what he has submitted. I don't know if that's acceptable.
That's very acceptable. I would request that you could come here so that everyone can see.
But the good thing, I have my PS here. So in case of any questions, I'm sure he can ably answer. Dr. Mugume. Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Siatini for always inviting us to be part of these discussions. I'd like to thank also Ferdinand, Tony, I think I've got the name right, for setting the scene for this discussion. He has talked about what Africa, the needs. I'm going to talk about on financing, so I won't go into the technical bits of energy. If you look at globally, we are looking at maybe annually raising 3.5 trillion for the energy transition. Now, we've made commitments that Dr. Isavi is going to talk about for us to transit to a low carbon or a net zero economy. And these require the financing. Now, if you look at the numbers under the UNFCCC, each country currently, if you look at our indices, we're supposed to invest like times 3 what we are investing. This year's budget, we've invested close to 1.3 trillion towards energy, sustainable energy, the program. And that means that we should be investing, if we are to meet our indices, around 4 trillion annually. Now, the question is, he has talked about the policies. We have the policies, and Dr. Isabi will speak to that. We need to invest in terms of capital investments for us to get there. And we need to use either the existing financing models that we've been undertaking, where we have our own resources, revenues from the taxes that everyone here pays, the grants that we get from our partners, the loans that we've got, but they should be concessional. Now, as a Minister of Finance, we know that if we don't meet our indices, we shall not get to the transition that we talk about. And that is why you see that we have recently, the ministry has recently created the unit that I head, the Climate Finance Unit, to make sure that we have people dedicated to raising this financing from all corners. So if you're here and you know where the money is, I'm going to leave my contacts, but the PS is here. You can also tell him where the money is, and we shall look for that money. But as we look for the money, we also are putting in place the prerequisite strategies. And currently, we are developing our national climate finance strategy in-house. But we are making sure that this strategy speaks to innovative ways that we can raise financing. We have already done a study on the market assessment for this innovative financing. For example, issues to do with carbon markets that he talked about, green bonds, debt for nature swaps, to mention but a few. So this strategy, we expect that everyone, maybe some of you will be part of the technical committees or the roundtable discussion that we're going to have for the specific stakeholders. For a change, actually, we are going to have roundtables for each of the groups. If it's civil society, we'll have only civil society. If it is academia, we'll call on academia to give us the views for this strategy, because we think that it is so important to have your views when developing this. Now, when you talk about energy, we have to talk about the private sector. That strategy, if you look at it, we want to raise at least 15% under the NDCs from our own resources. And this speaks to our private sector here. Now, on the external side, the 24.1 billion, we will have also private sector, but externally. But now we want to look at our private sector here. How do we put in place the right and strategies to make sure that they also are part of the action that we will require for the transition? Now, we are developing a national green taxonomy. We are starting this year. And this is the compendium of which activities, green activities, that private sector can undertake in all the sectors that we have. And we've already at least tried it out with the agricultural sector. We have an agribusiness taxonomy. Abi Finance, I think, took lead with support from the European Union. And we've already had at least a feel of what we can do. And it has helped a number of players, whether the supply side, the banks, the financial institutions, but then also the private sector, the farmers. How can they access what are green activities that they can involve in, and what financing is available there. So we want to develop another that is looking at all the sectors, and the energy sector is a priority for us. Then the Minister of Water and Environment, I don't know if there's a representative here. We think that for the renewable energy, we want to be a little bit innovative. Let's use carbon markets to make sure that we invest into renewable energy, but then we also get extra financing that we can also deploy to increase investment in climate action. I can give you an example. Under the Clean Development Mechanism, before we transition to carbon markets, there is, I think, Chivinge cooperative, I think coffee cooperative, deep down in Masaka. They had a carbon markets, so a CDM project that was looking at making sure that their members increase the uptake of the improved cook stoves. And it was a CDM project. Now the society is going to actually benefit around 120,000 euros out of this project. Now, these are the innovations that we are looking at. So if we are looking at even our oil sector, you've talked about the transitioning and what. We, on our side as the Minister of Finance, we are looking at, my colleague here from UNOC is here, so I don't know if she will answer some of the questions you're going to raise. But we are looking at using even the oil and gas sector to have innovative ways of being part of the carbon markets. Even before we look at making sure that we find solutions to have investments that speak to the emissions that we're going to undertake as we develop our oil. In the oil sector itself, there are opportunities for carbon markets. And these are things that we want to discuss with the sector, Dr. Isabile here, to make sure that we tap into that and use those resources for more climate action and reduction of emissions. On the private sector still, we are undertaking a CEO's roundtable. Now, this is a new initiative where we want to bring on board a number of CEOs on the financing side, but then also on the implementation side, whether in the energy sector or otherwise, to make sure that they include climate action, not as CSR, but as part of their core operations. So if it's, and basically, we are going to start with the financial sector, because we are now developing guidelines for greening the financial sector, and the Bank of Uganda is going to be instrumental. So at a certain point, you'll be required as a bank or a financial institution to invest at least maybe 20% or 30% of your investment towards clean or green investments. We're also undertaking a climate budget tagging, and this work is basically to tweak our budgeting system, the program-based budgeting system, to make sure that we can know how much are we investing in the energy sector. The exact investment that we're putting in. And each of the investment center should be able to tell us how much they're investing, and it will help us to improve on our planning. So, and lastly, mindset change is so important for us. We should look at every investment, even at our own level, as an opportunity for us to increase climate action. As I said, the permanent secretary is here. He will give us what they are doing in terms of the side of macroeconomic modeling. There's a lot of work they are doing to influence our investment and the budget. So we think that some of the areas in the national capital accounting speak to energy, and he will maybe be ready to answer any questions. And I would like to thank you so much for listening to me. And in case of any questions, the PS is here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mugaga, for those insights and taking us through what's really happening in the policy sphere at the national level, but also for underscoring that it all starts with NDCs. But what is critical is that we have a shortfall, a financial shortfall. So that is really what we need to interrogate or contribute to on how we can address that. But increasingly, we also appreciate the participation of key stakeholders in shaping, especially what Dr. Mugaga just alluded to, some of the initiatives underway, the National Green Taxonomy, the climate budget tagging, so that we can all contribute and be part of shaping the final outcome of those documents. So without really further ado, I think it would be important to give the microphone back to Mr. Ferdinand Tonye to address some of the concerns, but also speak to what Dr. Mugaga just shared with us, whether all that is fit for purpose and how we can link this to the geopolitics. Because as Uganda, we're not operating in a vacuum, we're integrated in the global economy. So are we doing it right, or we are still playing catch up? Over to you, Mr. Ferdinand Tonye, please.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to hear from the ministry and what they have been doing. They are doing quite very pretty insightful programs. I'm happy to hear about their structures they are putting in place to make sure that they help all sectors. I think one thing I forgot to mention is that energy transition, when we talk about transition, everybody goes to energy. But there are a lot of linkages when it comes to the whole transition. Energy is found in every sphere of human activities. So I'm happy they are doing something with relation to the agriculture sector. We can also be talking about cities. We can also be talking about even the energy space itself. So I don't think he asked any major question that I need to respond to, but he rather made points that are very clear that there is a need for Africa to be able to come out with a strategy to raise local bonds. We need to if we don't own percentage in all kind of project we do, we'll be losing out. So we know continental banks like Africa Development Banks, but can we be looking at also having a bank or a financial system that is very much interested in this transition, making sure that funding or when people want to go into green business, they can be able to get capital at a lower interest. This is very important. Can we be able to help people who are going into a great investment to have cheaper source of capital so that they can expand? So the whole transition shouldn't be looked at as it's about fossil fuel, cutting down on use of fossil fuel or renewable energies. No. For Africa, it's about we fighting against hunger in our local villages. For Africa, it's about we getting light for our schools, children in the village to sleep, to study in the evening before they go to bed. So it should be a broad discussion. It shouldn't be an issue that we always change. This is how the geopolitics play. when the whole idea of carbon financing is blown up, then all attention will be drawn towards that. But we also don't even come back to assess whether impact of some of these carbon finances to verify whether they are even making those savings. So the politics around even carbon financing should be very streamlined. I'm happy Uganda is trying to look at something like that. Ghana currently is also commissioning a research like that, looking at the carbon projects that are happening. From my one of my expert background is also in testing of improved cook stoves. So that is something I have a lot of technical background in it. And it's one of the biggest thing that is being used for this carbon credits. And I can tell you for fact that a lot of these technologies and what is being said about them and the savings is being said about them don't tally. So we need to think critically and look at this. Else, we'll stay in our country, and some of these improved technologies are imported. The majority of them are being imported. What about the local person, the local artisan, who is already making your normal coal pot or your cook stove that you use? How is government empowering them to be able to come to speed so that they can stop using scissors, hammer, and nail to be knocking things and rather semi-automate their processes? That is at the local level, at the informal level. Our informal sector having that ability to walk to the bank where they will not be asked to bring some sureties. If we don't think about this and know that Africa have a big informal sector business or employment, then we'll be focusing on this big carbon credit and we leave majority of Africa behind. And I'm happy for the initiatives that Uganda is taking. Over to you, MC.
Colleagues here, and I think allow me to also recognize the great insights that Dr. Mugaga shared in his absence. I think the message will be passed on to him that we truly appreciate his participation in this engagement and also creating some time to share some insights and also share with us really the updates around what is happening at the national level, the efforts, and also inviting us to contribute to the same. I think those are issues that we shall follow up on collectively as stakeholders. But I'm inviting all of us to share some thoughts, but also contribute to this discussion.
Thank you very much. I think maybe let me stand up because I'm going to speak for the average Orio Ugandan. I am happy that finance is looking at the bonds. And I'm asking myself, who is going to buy the bonds? For us, we buy charcoal, don't we? We buy charcoal regardless of what government says, because we need energy for lighting and for cooking. So if government can resolve our challenge with charcoal, and of course also the mindset, because we want to eat matoke on a Sunday, which is steamed. And because it brings a nice aroma, and I think Uganda a better place to start appreciating that. And I think also it has gender issues. I am interested in the trading in the forest resources because we have robust laws. Even those guys who cut timber in the night are trying to, because for us we speak to, I think we need a tree for a shade, or maybe the weather is too hot, so we want to relax our temperature. We are not looking at the broader, that maybe they will pay us for, they'll pay us for having put up a forest, that there would be a carbon sink or emissions will be mitigated. I think the best proposal we were in another discussion where we proposed a charcoal tax, which can generate revenue for government, but also it can prohibit on those that are getting the charcoal. I understand some of our charcoal is exported and it attracts a lot of revenue, but government does not tap that kind of revenue. So if government decided that we impose a tax or a levy for that matter, that means we will give licenses to those that are engaged in charcoal business, including giving licenses to those that are laying bricks and using the greater chunk of our forests. I think if we imposed that, we will generate local revenue from those districts where forests are being lost. But also these guys who earn a lot of money and are not in the pay as you earn, they generate lots of money and they are given their money, not those that earn a little. For instance, the teachers, and their money is paid through the bank and it is taxed. So I am voting for imposing a charcoal tax because the largest population of citizens want charcoal for cooking. And the biggest market for charcoal is in Kampala. And of course, also to look at those that are engaged in exporting our charcoal. That in a way can try to mitigate or reduce on our high appetite, but then also we'll start to look at the other alternatives. For instance, solar or electricity. Yaka will limit on how we boil our food. It will change our mindset. But also even gas. I know of people who are engaged in cooking who perhaps will light the charcoal stove and then go to the shop to buy milk, which they are going to come and prepare. But if they are looking at Yaka or the gas, they will not use all that time wasting. And also they are maybe watching TikTok as the water is overboiling. I know for a fact there are those who go in a bathroom because, and then bathe for something like 2 hours. But if you know that there is a cost and we feel it, then in a way or the other, we would reduce on the tree populations that we are cutting every other time. I hope you buy into my idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. The professor spoke for those of us, the real Ugandans. And there's a temptation not to speak, but I will add my voice. So thank you, Ndug Ferdinand, for this presentation and for the rich man who left for the insights. So Comrade Ferdinand, I hope you hear me.
Yes.
So I was moved. My name is Adventino. I'm a PhD student at Makerere. I was moved by the question you left us with in your presentation. So you ask us to reflect on the question, what does energy transition means to Africa? And I've been thinking about this question. So I was thinking by posing this question or asking us to reflect on this question, you mean that we can only engage the discourse on energy transition from where we are, that is from Africa, right? So we can only see this discourse on transition from where we stand. And of course, by Africa, meaning a physical, historical, political, and others would even add an epistemic location. So we stand here in a historical place, in a political context, to see this discourse on energy transition. So that's what I got from that question you left us with. What does energy transition mean to Africa? And I suppose that then we can even ask, when we engage this discourse on energy transition, from where we stand, from where you stand, Comrade Ferdinand, in Ghana, in an African location, what do we see? So, and I had this question, which is not a question you should answer,
But then how do we think about the mainstream discourse on energy transition? Is it a new redefinition by Europe or the West or the global North of Africa's place in a world that is now ravaged by pollution, by Europe's or global North's historical pollution? So what is this for us? Because I mean, when we see this discourse and what it means to us, we see our forests turning into new carbon sinks. We see our land, the land in Africa, what people here have been calling the critical minerals, they're here. So a redefinition of this land as now a massive repository for these critical minerals. So I've been thinking, because you are from an institute and you said that this is the only UN institute, United Nations University Institute that is based in Africa, that is located here. So how do you think about this question? Thinking about Africa as historical, and you suggested a historical precedent, but also as political location. How does the knowledge you produce at this institute help us to think through these realities? So it's a general question which you may not answer, you may reflect upon. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Ferdinand. My name is Andrew Biarohanga. I'm the Executive Director at Resource Rights Africa. Indeed, I was, just like the previous speakers noted, I reflected on one of the issues you raised, and that is the rush for these critical minerals. Just for energy transition to happen by those who are polluting at the moment, we realize that, and in order to meet the global goal of the Paris Agreement of 2015, that the demand, for example, for lithium extraction will need to grow fastest, at least 40 times from the current extraction by 2040. And when you look at other minerals like graphite, cobalt, nickel, will need to be taken from the ground 20 to 25 times faster than the current extraction rate. So, Ferdinand, in this line, in line with the different studies you've noted, I want to ask, are there any insights that you've come across in terms of projections, looking at how the rush for extraction of these critical minerals will mean in terms of wars and conflict on the African continent? Bearing in mind, for example, like for those who have watched the Seven Sisters in the oil and gas sector, I think we need to reflect again in this. So I wanted to know whether in those studies you've undertaken, what are the projections? What are we learning in terms of future wars and conflict on the African continent arising from the rush for these critical minerals? Thank you. I'm not the moderator.
Okay, Haji, you can go first. I'll go later.
It's good to have your student sort of pass it on, but thank you very much for your kind. It's good to have students in the room so they can allow you some bit of space. Thanks, our comrade Hussein. It's a bit scary, but that's the truth. I have, with your indulgence, my name is Ahmed Haji. I work with the Center for Policy and Strategic Studies. We do a lot of, I don't want to usually use titles, also in academia as well. My focus is going to be on, I want to give a few, if you permit, like about 3 minutes.
I would request, because I was intending to call you to join the panel.
Yeah.
So you could save that
yeah.
for that session, please.
Then I will pass the mic back to Hussein.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haji. Haji was my mentor. He introduced me to the civil society space. My name is Hussein Katomuyinda, and I'm the Executive Director, Earth and Rights Initiative. I'm passionate about using the law to preserve, conserve, and protect the environment. I want to first clarify one thing. Mugaga is not around, but I think the PS is around. We do not have carbon markets in Uganda. We do have a carbon policy, but we don't have the market. Uganda, we have a tendency of misleading things. We call roads parts. We call parts roads, that we have roads. We don't have roads. My point is Uganda, why I say we don't have a carbon market. The Uganda carbon market policy were first developed in the early 2010. And then that led to the creation of the establishment of the Climate Change Department within the Ministry of Water and Development. So I'm giving you the chronology how these things started. Then after that, Uganda published the National Climate Change Policy. And then in 2015, we signed the Paris Agreement. By virtue of Article 4 of that agreement, it mandates us to have the following things. The National Climate Change Policy, which recognizes the importance of carbon markets, but we do not have the what? The markets. It's just by virtue that we are signatory to the Paris Agreement, that's why we are talking about these carbon markets. Then it also led to the creation of the National Climate Change Strategy of 2016, which sets out a number of actions to be taken to develop the carbon markets in Uganda. It is a strategy that sets out. Doesn't mean that we have the markets. I'll beg to be clarified if the markets are there by the experts in Uganda. But now my key issues are, after following that background that I've given, we have key issues to address. We cannot have a carbon market to address the energy transition if we do not have a comprehensive carbon market law. Do we have it? I'll leave that question to the ministry to, maybe it's there and we do not know that it's there. Then the lack of a transparent and effective carbon registry. Where do you register from if you're going to deal in this carbon issue? Do you go to URSB? Do you go to, where do you go? So we do not have that. Then the lack of awareness and understanding of the carbon markets amongst the businesses and the public, including us in this room. We do not understand the issues that we're talking about. If you ask randomly here what are carbon markets, I am sure some of us are hearing it for the first time. Then I'll go to the legal framework. I'm trying to go very fast. The lack of comprehensive renewable energy law, that is also lacking. We are talking about the lack of the carbon market law, lacking. Then we're also lacking the comprehensive renewable energy law. It is not there. Then there is an issue of the complex of permitting processes. Mugaga talked about a coffee, something that he wasn't also clear about. But it clearly shows you that there is a complex in permitting the processes. Who should invest in it? And how do they invest in it? How do you apply for it? And then, of course, we have the weak enforcement of environmental laws. That one I'll not talk about it. It's evident. If you're going to talk about these issues of energy transition, how are we going to enforce? There are areas in this country that are renowned for having natural resources, let's say wind, in the Karamoja area. Can government make laws that before you build a hotel, you must have an alternative renewable energy facility? There are investors who can do that. Then, basically, that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to clarify on that, but also bring to the attention of the ministry. If they can tell us that whether we have a comprehensive law in place, and then also if they can tell us, do we really have a market? How does it work? Who goes where? And what is the commitment? Because very soon I'm taking you to court, as with the Environmental Shield. We are preparing a case where you realize that you failed to fulfill your NDCs. You went to there, you ate sumbusas, you signed documents. Now, 10 years ago, nothing has been implemented. And we think as citizens, and they are making new commitments, but they have not fulfilled the other commitments. But in good spirit, I think it's a good conversation, and I thank Siatini for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to advise, since we need government representation here on the panel, and also other colleagues who are already on the program. That is we made an amendment because we are not able to get Mr. Mithika Mwenda online. So I propose that Mr. Dr. Ahmed Haji, who is a senior fellow with Africa Institute for Strategy and Policy, joins the panel. And then we also have Dr. Brian Isavile from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, so that at least after that discussion, we could have now, please.
I need a clarification. Mugaga is not around, but he talked about the department that was created at the ministry.
The
yes.
PSST.
And I'd also want to
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Please pass on the microphone to him.
Honestly, it's not about court and the rest. That one will answer there. But this really is about the presentation from Ferdinand and the presentation from Mugaga. First, really, I would like to thank Mugaga in absence here for making it clear that for Uganda we are transitioning, and we're putting actions in place to make us transit. And one of them is the CFU, like he said, and the ministry has been doing a lot that is explained. He didn't talk about natural capital accounting, but that one they're doing also. He didn't talk about the green procurement policy that is coming in place. He didn't talk about extending of the social accounting matrix. So all those things are happening in the country because we realize this is a big problem. It's about climate change. And we know we must transit. But going back to Dr. Fernand's presentation, I had some few additions, but at the same time, some few questions, one or two, and the point where I differ from him a little, which I needed him to clarify. One of them is the key challenges that we're facing in Africa. Yes, you put it right. And developing countries, meeting development goals, and they come from the finance part of it. Looking for money is difficult, but at the same time achieving the climate action ambitions like we're trying in Uganda. Those are two things. My thinking, doctor, and what I think should be done is, and what we're looking at, the way we're looking at it from Uganda is, these two should be mutually exclusive and independent. We should look at climate actions as development actions. For example, the 1.3 trillion that we invested in the economy, in renewable energy, we're looking at it to increase our GDP. And this is the way we should do it. And this goes along to inform us. If we look at our actions, like the National Action Adaptation Plans, the NDCs, and we look at them independently from our budgets and development plans, then we shall not reach there. So that's a humble comment that we could look at. And then also, you talked about Africa, how we come together, how we should be able to solicit for support. But I find it a little bit, yes, it's climate action, and the debate here is being north, the global north versus global south, which I don't think is the right debate for me, because I know the world we are living in, as poor countries, as developing countries, we are more vulnerable to climate change shocks than even global north. So we are more concerned. However, when about the support, yes, but why? Why do we look for support? We are rich countries. Why are we going begging? Why can't we use our resources to get the money? Why? How are we using our resources? That's a question we should reflect on. Is it to beg? Should we beg or demand for our rights? And if they are duty bearers, then we should put them at task. If we cannot put them on a task to pay us, then they are not duty bearers. And we should realize and come back and sit down and use what we have. Because, like you said, I know I've gone to different meetings. These meetings where I go for, like COP, we're going to Dubai next. But Dr. Ferdinand, as Africa, how prepared are we? As countries, as Uganda is prepared, I know. But as Africa, are we prepared enough? When we go there, what do we look for? How do we engage our debates? Engaging the debate in like a room like this, before you've done the pre-debates, for me, doesn't make sense, a lot of sense. So as Africa, yes, the climate week was there. How much did we? Probably you'll answer that. The last comment, moderator, I can see you, is about transition. Doctor, I would like to differ with you a little bit about the transition. If you look at transition, like the PhD candidate said it and yourself, in terms of the location where you are, in terms of a country, in terms of a continent, in my view, you may not get the point right. The transition should be global. Let's look at the global transition. In my view, you may, can have a long debate here, but we definitely have individual responsibilities as countries and as continents. The responsibilities may differ, like they are being shown in our NDCs, but we cannot run from our responsibilities because we're poor, because we're doing what, and because we want to have people get employment, because we know we've done the models. I can tell you have studies here that I could talk about a lot, that if we don't do this, then poverty will increase in the future. But if we go into this and go into it within our means and taking our responsibilities like we've stated them, then chances are that economic growth will be high, employment will go high, poverty will reduce. These are studies. There's evidence about these studies. So that I wanted to differ a little bit. If I got you wrong, probably you'll say it, but that was a little bit where I wanted to submit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mugume. I would really request, if you allow me, that you join the panel. But as you join, Mr. Ferdinand will be responding, and immediately after his response, we'll have the discussion. But there is room for all of us to contribute to the discussion, because I know Dr. Mugume Kojo might be leaving soon. You're here, but please, if you allow me, I invite you to join the team on the panel. Mr. Ferdinand, please, could you respond to some of those concerns and questions, supplements that are coming in from colleagues here?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. This is quite interesting and very rich conversation. And I want to start from the last submission. Yes, I made mention that we are stirring a conversation. We are stirring up a conversation. Transition is a global agenda. No two ways about it. The dynamics from continent to continent, to sub-region, from one nation to another nation varies. You have their agenda. Does Africa have its own agenda? That is what we are talking about. Every continent, America has its own agenda. China was there at climate summit. China spoke in an open space and saying that we are looking for the gaps in the adaptation and mitigation actions and see how we can provide technology to solve it. That is China's stand. So if we are saying transition is a global thing, but various sessions, continentally, regionally, have their interest, and that is what we are talking about. We also project, or we come with what African leaders are saying. Next 2 weeks, we are going back to some various countries. There's another research we are doing towards the COP. We have even had some discussion with very top officials from various countries and even the development partners. There is the ultimate global agenda that we need to transition. So transition is not a local agenda, it is a global agenda. But every continent, and even going down to countries, have interest. They have peculiar issues. Whenever you don't plan your agenda well, you meet at COP and it will be a talk show. So my presentation was throwing light on what we hear from Africa governments. As I mentioned, that our current work from about 9 countries, which we selected carefully, and knowing that they are very key players in this fossil fuel industry. So transition is a global thing, I understand, but every nation and sub-region or regional bloc comes with an agenda. You always talk about carbon market, carbon market, carbon market. China have its own tone. US have its own tone. That is why I'm saying that what is our definition? How do we understand our transition in Africa? That is all I meant, but it's a global thing. The other thing I want to talk about, preparing for COP, whether we do prepare very well for COP. It has been one of the issues. Anytime we come back from COP, we launch a new research because the continuous issues. Currently, I can mention about 4 or 5 issues that will be coming up in COPs, because even the Nairobi Declaration will give you a clue of what Africa want to say already, and the UN Secretary General was there. The other superpowers were there. What they want to be saying there is already there. Loss and damages have been on the table. It has not been critically zoomed into. It will come up again. So there's this conversation that I think we should be looking at. What do we want? What is the problem we have? For example, let me make this revelation from one of our research. We are talking about, I heard somebody mentioning that there should be tax on charcoal. So we wake up one early morning in any of the African country, maybe Uganda, you tax charcoal and charcoal becomes expensive. And LPG is another clean source that you may be thinking of, which is coming from fossil, but it's a bit cleaner and they can't afford. Then we don't understand the challenge in the village. In the local community, he doesn't buy fuel, he walks to the bush. You said he should leave the forest. You shouldn't go and harvest firewood. You have not provided alternatives. There are sectors that are very energy consuming. Cooking, they have, as I mentioned, I've been involved in some international projects on clean cooking and things like that. Currently, we are hosting the whole CCA, and I'll be one of the facilitators on that program in Ghana, where they are bringing people from all over the globe in December. The issues are very, very special issues, and they are not the same as other African countries. You need to walk down. LPG was subsidized in Ghana just to make sure that the poor can be able to access it to cook. You know what happened? The next morning, they woke up and all public vehicles started retrofitting their cars and then changing to gas. A policy that was to solve a problem of a poor person to leave the dirty fuels behind, not to smoke themselves to death, have been initiated. Subsidies it has been reduced, but only the next morning, commercial entities took advantage of it and they were using it to do their business. These are challenges, and it becomes difficult for the government to separate this, to segregate this market. So they just call a hold on that initiative. This is what I'm talking about, that we must come to the table with the reality that Africa is facing. We have to be part of the global agenda, but we have to come with the reality from our zones and our continent. Else we'll face those challenges. I think I want to also just end by saying that climate action as a part of development action is something I relate to. Yes, that is what government have been saying. A lot of government have been saying that we are rather looking at development, a green development, and which energy transition is part of it. Not energy transition having development as part of it, but rather our development for our continent, which they consider energy transition as part of it. This is what I mean. I understand some of these terms, and then these positions are are normally debatable. But as I mentioned, we sometimes want to say this is what Africa government are saying. They will speak in the mic at COP nicely, but the realities on ground for researchers like some of us, when we go, we see it's real and it is quite different from what they speak on into the mic at the higher podiums. I want to end here, and I want to also say that I'm looking forward to enjoy the rich discussion and the panel that is put together currently. Thank you. Hello, I can't hear. If you can help me with the sound.
Hello, Mr. Ferdinand, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear now. Thank you so much.
Yes. Now it's the time for the panel discussion. And I was introducing the esteemed panel. And on the panel, we have Dr. Mugume Kojo, who is representing the Permanent Secretary and the Secretary to the Treasury, Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. So he's here in the capacity of the Permanent Secretary. You're welcome, sir. And next to him, after him, we have Dr. Ahmed Haji, who is a senior fellow with the Africa Institute for Strategy and Policy. We are glad to have you, sir. And lastly, we have Dr. Brian Isabile from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. So the panel will be sharing insights on a number of issues. But if I could start with Dr. Isabile, he will be speaking to existing policy interventions, all frameworks, and interrogating them on whether they are fit for purpose to drive or support the energy transition in Uganda or Africa. And Dr. Ahmed Haji will be sharing some insights from the research and the academia field so that we could also be able to appreciate what the academia and the researchers have to offer in the quest for the energy transition. And a number of issues were left a bit hanging from the discussion that we had initially, the sharing that Dr. Mugaga Dennis made, the number of policies that he touched on, that's really unfinished business that we request Dr. Mugume Kojo to finish and also be able to elucidate further on the same. But also, since he comes from finance, where the money is, and a lot is happening there in terms of putting in place finance policy instruments to achieve really urgent climate action, we request that you speak to financing a fair, inclusive, and just transition in Uganda, but also Africa. And across all the different fields that we come from, I request that we all speak to achieving policy coherence for a just energy transition in Uganda and Africa, because different ministries, departments, and agencies are represented here. However, we need those policies to speak to each other. So the issue of policy coherence cannot be overemphasized. So I request our esteemed panelists to speak to the issue of achieving policy coherence for a just energy transition in Uganda and Africa at large. So I will start from the extreme right. That's Dr. Brian Isabile from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. Please talk to us on whether the existing policy interventions and frameworks are fit for purpose.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope I'm very audible and sorry that.
I think there is room for all the key stakeholders to be represented. So allow me to invite, we are not just inserting someone, but allow me to bring on our CSO perspectives. And I request my colleague, Ms. Penina Babazi, to bring those insights. Penina, please. Although I'd like to emphasize that we're not just inserting her, but I think CSO perspectives are key in this discussion. We'll continue with that discussion. Thank you.
I also want to start by emphasizing that all the panelists are married, and so gender is taken care of here. I can see. Honestly, delegates of this meeting, I was intimidated to join because the doctor here promised to take us to court. So I almost did not join. But courageous as I am, I took the courage to sit here. I also want to inform the panelists and of course the audience that we have that I manage the Renewable Energy Department at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development as a commissioner. And so I'll answer right away from my introduction that yes, we have a policy for renewable energy from as back as 2007, because that was one of the concerns that I would be taken to court for. So I want to say right from the beginning that that is clear. I was also tempted to ask a few questions to the presenter, but also to contribute to the discussion between my colleague from PSST and the presenter that set the scene on the kind of energy transition that we are discussing. I want to agree with all of you that energy transition is a global good. All we need is domestication of these actions, just like we've done for the NDCs. Each country has domesticated which actions and has come up with commitments. As Uganda were at 17.7, I think, we recently moved to 24.7. So those are commitments. And within these, we've come up with actions that we think as a country we are comfortable doing. But I want right at the beginning to also set a challenge amongst all of us here, that this narrative around climate change needs to be changed. You see, when we had COVID, the Western world was vulnerable, but still they made money out of COVID. So they sold a lot of vaccines, even when they were vulnerable. Now, climate change action may also be the goal that Africa and other such countries have been waiting for. While it is a challenge, it's also an opportunity for us. And that's why I also wanted to answer another concern by my colleague, the doctor, again, so that by the time I'm done with this panel, probably we don't have many cases in courts of law. In Africa, Uganda contributes 8% of the carbon credits that are sold. And we indeed rank number 5 in this continent, even when we lack aggregation. So from the CDM mechanism, we have been participating as a Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development at that sector alone. And there are many sectors, because we are not the biggest contributors, it's a follow. Ours is small, but we have sold 8.55 million carbon credits in the recent times as a sector. That is just a statistic to show us that there are opportunities that we can harness from this space. So the market may have issues, but it is there. And that's why we are number 5 in the whole continent, contributing 8% of these credits that we are trading. So for us as a sector, we think this is an opportunity for us to drive our agenda as stated in NDP3, but also other national commitments such as the NDC that we've just revised. So I want to start from up on some of the things that we are doing, having realized that this is a lucrative area that we could benefit from. We recently completed a national situation analysis which is the first step towards develop an energy transition plan for the country. This particular work has been done by government of Uganda, but with the support from International Energy Agency. So every country is putting in place a costed energy transition plan. So our situation analysis covered all aspects of energy. So we addressed or we assessed the cooking status or the prospects for clean cooking. We looked at our current generation mix and access levels, which currently stand, the access stands at about 57%. We also looked at our potential for renewable energy across the country and energy efficiency and conservation as well. We looked at aspects of health, safety, and environment, and in a holistic way looked at our potential for an ESG framework for the country. We also addressed enablers such as the critical minerals, including the rare earth mineral potential for this country. So through that comprehensive situation analysis, which was completed about June this year, we started working on an energy transition plan, which will emphasize a low carbon pathway and of course a low cost energy development plan for this country that will take care of all the mixes, the resources that will grow our energy mix as a country. This particular energy transition plan, which is a country document, the way you would have the NDC, will be first launched at the Renewable Energy Conference in November this year, but then also launched at COP 28, which all of us should be participating in. The whole essence of this energy transition plan is to make sure that we get collective action, subsidiarity, but also spillover of opportunities that come from our individual actions. So for us at the energy sector, we have a plan. And I'm sure, and my colleague will speak to some of the other actions in Afolu and the other areas. So whether our our policy and institutional framework is fit for purpose will come from some of the actions that I will mention that as a country we are undertaking. In terms of policies, and just to repeat for emphasis and to survive a case at court, is that this country in 2007 set a renewable energy policy. That renewable energy policy looked at aspects that would lead us to lower the carbon emissions of this country, but also identified opportunities that would drive adoption of renewable energy. And one of the master strokes of that policy was to come up with a harmonized power purchase agreement framework, which is key for private sector investment. But also through that policy, 2 departments of government were set up. So the Renewable Energy Department, which I head, was a result of that policy. And so was the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Department at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. These 2 departments and the overall mandate of the policy as it is were intended to look at how Uganda can harness sustainably our natural resource, our renewable energy resources for socioeconomic transformation, but also environmental stewardship of this country. Soon after that, and my colleague, Mr. Mugaga mentioned the climate change policy of 2015, but also the Paris Agreement, which we are signatory to, came in. And that set us to speak to the global agenda. Recently, we launched the revised energy policy for Uganda, 2023. And this particular policy is framed to look at aspects of a low carbon pathway for this country. So our generation and utilization of energy resources will be following that low carbon pathway. And it set a very ambitious target in generation. Our current generation is about just slightly above 2,000 installed capacity when Kaluma is finally fully launched. But now by 2040, our target is to move ourselves to 52,000 megawatts. That's adding 50,000. And the strategy which we set before the policy we have a national generation strategy, looks at all the resources that we have as a country, including nuclear, which should be contributing the biggest chunk of our energy, 24,000 megawatts as such. Then of course, solar, wind, and the other resources that we have as a country will come in. At sector level, we have the climate change strategy and action plan. that addresses aspects of what we need to do as a sector if we are to sustainably develop our energy resources in a country in an environmentally sustainable way, but also a responsible way. So that is our action at that level. And recently we have started working with the climate finance unit on how we can bring down the national actions on climate financing to the sector level to identify the opportunities that we have as a country to benefit, some of which I have already mentioned that we are being beneficiaries. So my colleague mentioned that at the national level, they are coming up, or we are coming up with the climate finance strategy, which again will bring us together to address aspects of transparency that you've talked about, which are critical in the carbon markets. Because carbon markets have been in the past involved in a lot of issues that have lowered the confidence. So aspects of transparency, but also aspects of integrity and community, taking care of community interests will be covered by this strategy. So this will help us as a country to grow our carbon markets, and it addresses aspects that Mr. Mugaga mentioned, green bonds, debts for nature, and other aspects where we need to gain resources from to drive our national development agenda. I must also mention right at the beginning that we keep confusing climate financing with carbon financing. The two speak to each other, but they're not exactly the same. So I'll leave that to a senior fellow, because I'm not a senior fellow, to speak to us on the difference between carbon financing, but also carbon market as an option within that carbon financing, because we've had quite a number. I'll leave hard things for the hard scientists that we are happy to have here. My colleague mentioned that us as the Minister of Energy, and indeed other sectors, are looking at aspects of national green taxonomy, where private sector is key. My department, that renewable energy deals mostly with private sector, because most of the people or most of the developers are independent power producers, are private sector in nature. So we are also looking at the national green taxonomy on what are the opportunities that we should generate, including aspects of the carbon capture and others as such. I want to emphasize, because this came up, and then I'll speak to how the structure is. Please allow me time, because I saved my minutes. I didn't ask questions. Clean cooking is critical, and for us as a ministry and as a sector is critical, both in terms of our drive to move away from the predominantly traditional biomass for cooking to cleaner forms. So NDP3 gave us an ambitious target to move ourselves from almost predominantly 100% traditional biomass to cleaner forms, but by up to 50%. So the share of biomass in our cooking should reduce up to 50%. And that means we reduce the amount of biomass we are using. The latest report put us at 78%. We are still at 78% on traditional biomass. And that's why conversations around charcoal still come in. So as a country and as a sector, we have come up, or we are working on a national clean cooking strategy and action plan. This particular work is being supported by a number of philanthropies, but also our national resources. The idea is to have this as the national anchor strategy and action plan for driving our clean cooking. But also, this action plan will identify opportunities for us swapping from traditional biomass and attracting carbon financing. We also have in there another, in a way of affirmative action, we have developed a national electricity cooking strategy and action plan. That is a dedicated action plan for electricity for cooking. That comes with the knowledge that electricity is the cleanest form of energy for cooking, but it also provides opportunities for carbon financing, where development or private sector, development partners or development or private sector that are intending to have carbon swaps or to go net zero can invest in this country. And indeed, we have started receiving interest from global players that are speaking to that strategy. In the last month, following the Africa Climate Week, we received interest from companies. One of them wants to bring EPCs, those are electric pressure cookers, 1 million those would be 1 million households. The other one wants also to do the same, but for 1.5 EPCs. So that would mean that within that action alone, we are able to transition 2.5 households to electricity for cooking. We shall have a conversation on availability of electricity also. But this shows you how carbon markets provide the cheapest or the most available opportunity for us to transition our cooking, but also to drag in financing for this country. As I am talking now, in one of the halls, we are developing a national roadmap for solar development and capacity building. And that is by my department and my ministry, and I will join that shortly. Again, this comes because as a country, we've put across a generation strategy that elevates the role of solar in our energy mix. So because solar is critical, both for on-grid and off-grid, we are developing a national roadmap for solar. This particular work is funded by International Solar Alliance, but also with the government of Uganda. And because capacity is a challenge, we are also going to develop a capacity strategy for driving that solar, both human but also institutional. So whether the policy is fit for purpose, if you want me to answer in a percentage, maybe to some extent, yes, but there are still gaps and there are still initiatives. I see you people looking at me, wanting me to stop, but there are things, because this is government work and the government is big. So I have to mention it in its broadness. So we still have our policy, institutional and regulatory framework, including the markets, quite fragmented. So as I speak, some of the things that I'm talking to belong to Minister of Water and Environment. PSST is here. Some of the work we are doing is with the civil society. We have a whole under environmental alert leadership. We have a CSO platform for renewable energy. So we are still fragmented in efforts. And that way, we are not using our resources meaningfully. But we have started consolidating this, and Mr. Mugaga and indeed the PSST representative will talk about the climate finance unit, which is an attempt to consolidate us to benefit from this climate financing. At the ministry level, at the sector level, we have a program working group that also tries to bring us together. Last week, at the regional level, we attended the second regional directors of climate financing meeting in Entebbe. This is a regional attempt to bring players within the East African community, but the region as a whole, to see how we can harmonize our efforts towards a common cause that Ferdinand was talking about, on how can we position the region to be such a region that negotiates jointly but has common actions. Because even within the work that we do, for example, in terms of electricity, we are part of the East African energy pool. So some of the things that we are doing to decarbonize regional actors at the regional level. In terms of the private sector and other stakeholder engagement or support, I can mention for emphasis that as government, we set up the National Renewable Energy Platform, which is similar to what Seatini does. And that's why I never miss these Seatini meetings, because it's a critical platform. So the way NREP works is the way Seatini works, bringing together government partners like those that we have here, private sector and civil society organizations we have here, local governments, and I know we have local government representatives here, but also development partners. So in the energy space, we have an energy development partner group. So they are part of this NREP platform. And now NREP locks into Seatini, because Seatini covers beyond energy. So we are bringing these particular platforms as platforms for conversation. So when I come here, I talk to people that are different. And I know that Seatini conversations will continue at the Renewable Energy Conference in November that I'm encouraging you to register for. This particular conversation we are having is a mock conversation that will culminate into a national conversation at the Renewable Energy Conference between 16th to 18th November. We have technical working groups dedicated to certain aspects, but which bring in all the key stakeholders. For example, we have a technical working group on productive use of energy that is looking at how we can use low carbon pathway generated energy to drive development. So aspects of parish development model now come in. So we have representatives of local government under the parish development model that we are working with at that level. Specifically for local governments, we have a waste to energy working group, which has in it a council of mayors. This council of mayors brings together local government leaders to discuss aspects of how we can improve our waste to use value chains. And for us, our interest as energy is to look at the energy stream that comes from this waste to energy. The particular one for the Greater Kampala Metropolitan is headed by His Lordship, Honorable Elias Lukwago at that level. We are also part of the global platforms such as Gogla, which is a global platform for off-grid, which again links us to the global players, but also subscribe to international renewable energy agents and other such. I've already mentioned the ISA. I have finished my input at that level, and you can imagine it's quite a long one. I wanted to speak one to answer some of the questions. I've answered all the questions that you had, whether we are fit to do, whether there is a market for carbon. We have a market, it needs changing. On carbon tax, we are working with FAO on a project that is looking at sustainable charcoal development in this country. In the short to medium, charcoal will be here. Charcoal employs directly 200,000 Ugandans. That is almost 50% of all the civil servants in this country. So we appreciate that charcoal value chain will have to be transitioned. We must transition the livelihoods. We must transition the jobs that are there. At the production side, where you're producing, we must transition the technologies. So improved technologies in the short will be critical. In the logistics section of the charcoal value chain, 78% of the employees there are women. The women that do distribution of this charcoal. These are jobs, these are livelihoods. So you can't just shut it down. We are transitioning these women to cleaner forms of energy. For example, supporting women who have been selling charcoal to sell ethanol in small quantities, such that their jobs are transitioned. In the consumer side of the charcoal value chain, we are looking at how we can transition these consumers to cleaner forms. I've already mentioned the EPCs for electricity. I can also mention LPG and can mention ethanol for cooking and the other forms. So we want to transition the consumers also. So in the interim, we want to improve this charcoal value chain as we transition it. I think that answers a bit. So the charcoal tax is a good intervention, but it has to be structured very well, not to cause problems, because this tax is sent straight to the consumers. Once you increase it, you put a tax, it will go to the consumers. And then we shall increase our energy policy. And my professor here will talk about energy poverty, not policy. We must be careful as we transition from charcoal not to increase energy poverty because it has issues. At that, carbon credit, I've talked about that. Change the narrative, I talked about. Comprehensive law, I've talked about that. I should stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brian Isabidie. I think before I call on the next speaker, I would like to pick up just a few points from the submissions that he made. One, he informed us that the nationally determined contributions were revised, and that is feeding into the energy transition plan, which will be launched in November this year. And actually, I'm amazed at the pace, by the pace at which policies are being developed, quite a number of them. But from where I come from, civil society, we recognize that the engagement of key stakeholders has been rather ad hoc. And just wondering how inclusive the development of all those policies has been, and whether the key stakeholders have been really brought on board. Commissioner, you also hinted on the fragmented actions across MDAs. And that is actually a big challenge because the energy transition doesn't only require the Ministry of Energy or Finance. It requires even overhauling the education system because we need the human resource to support the energy transition. Maybe if you could speak to that a bit before I call on the next speaker. Thank you.
I picked the first on inclusivity. There are guidelines in governments, even in failed states. Ours is not, is a functional government. So, but I've had a chance to work at a regional level, including countries that you could call failed states. The guidelines in developing policies are the same. Policies must be very inclusive. In our case, we've tried as much as possible to be inclusive, but doesn't mean that we've done it very well. There could be gaps for us to fill, but our guidelines are clear. We must be inclusive. So civil society organizations, all their representatives have been involved. For example, in the revised energy policy, which I participated in myself. On many occasions, we've had representatives of civil society. We have representatives of private sector. Whether that was enough or whether we invited enough is something I don't want to say, yes, it was enough. Because civil society is big. Private sector is big. So if you have two people representing civil society organizations, probably that's not enough. But in a way, we have done our part. We need to improve. We need to get more into these platforms. And that's why I came here to tell you about Energy Transition Plan. And some of you are hearing about it for the first time. Probably this is part of our consultative process. But if you ask me, we need to do more. Because then the consumers or the recipients of these policies that we are developing belong here. So the stakeholders of Siatini should be the starting point. We had a presentation, a first presentation at Golden Tulip last week of the draft Energy Transition Plan. Tomorrow it is going to be presented to top management at the ministry. Then there is a session that will bring together the wider stakeholders to present. The presentation of this plan in the Renewable Energy Conference in November is supposed to be a presentation to a wider stakeholder, because we know it is not fair for us to present it at COP before it is being presented at the wider level. So we need to do more, and we are happy if we are given a chance to present this to the Siatini specific stakeholders of how the plan is shaping. So if we get an invitation, me and my colleagues, we are happy to present this. But yes, your concern is right. Maybe we are not doing enough consultation, but it's also about resources sometimes. And I want to thank Siatini for always looking for these resources to host us here. Sometimes when we invite stakeholders, and I think I should mention this, and there's no transport refund, they don't come. You know, they don't come, but we invite them. So when you tell them come, after they say, where is the transport refund? So, but we'll do more, and my colleague will be tasked to help us to say more. The PSST, you know, I'm seated with the permanent secretary, so I don't want to say more. He will speak to some of these inclusivity issues. Thank you.
Responses, because he didn't really decline to say that enough really, I mean, a lot needs to be done in order to reach all the stakeholders and reach out to the constituencies of all the stakeholders. I think that gives us room to engage the ministry, but also to also mobilize other actors, because we are not representing all the actors in this space. There are those that are still out of this room that we need to reach. And it would be critical for me to bring in Ms. Penina Mbabazi from the civil society, just to share some perspectives, because those could be responding to what Dr. Brian Isabili has raised, but also some other insights from the people, because where she sits, we are representing quite a multiplicity of stakeholders. Penina, over to you.
Thank you. Well, as much as there's been so much that has already been shared in regards to the different policies that are in place and what the Ministry of Energy is really trying to do, and we thank you for always being open to coming on board to share with us and educate us, especially with the wider stakeholders. Just as my colleague has mentioned, not every stakeholder is in this room, but we believe that we can grow the numbers in trying to understand these issues and shaping, especially shaping these policies to actually speak to the different groups or categories that should be represented in most of these spaces. So in most of the issues in regards to, especially when it comes to I would like to share, especially on trade and investment related agreements. And most of them have been already coming into form in so many different areas and aspects.